Hello, everyone. I guess I can take my mask off since we're all virtually visiting each other. My name is David Bledsoe. I'm the Student Engagement and Communications Manager at the College Fund. And I want to welcome all of you to our social break event this afternoon. This is really an opportunity for us just to come together in community to connect, take a break, don't think about anything, just kind of enjoy what's going on. I know a lot of you are working towards the end of your semesters and finals. And this is an opportunity just to kind of let go, to connect with some people. Be sure to open your chat, introduce yourself, say where you're from. We always like to see everyone that's joining us and where they're joining us from. But today we're going to have a lot of different Native authors that are going to be reading some of their works. We have some great books and comics that we're going to be giving away to all the people that attend. So just by you showing up today, you're already entered to win. We'll be giving those away after our event today. So thank you so much for being a part of our event. So we're going to start with actually a very well-known Native artist. His book There made a huge splash and was heralded by a lot of different critics and people. Tommy Orange is actually a graduate of the Institute of American Indian Arts, a great tribal college in Santa Fe that the American Indian College Fund supports and provides scholarships for. And we're so proud of the work that he did in this kind of groundbreaking work. It's not autobiographical, but it's very based on his growing up in an urban area in Oakland, California. And so the reading with this first reading that we have is recorded, and it's him reading from the part of his book called Urbanity, and it talks about some of the issues and things that he faced, growing up in an urban setting, but still trying to connect with his Native culture and roots. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll move along to a few other things and just enjoy the time here. Feel free to chat, share things. This is a time for us just to kind of take it easy.
Urbanity. Urban Indians were the generation born in the city. We've been moving for a long time, but the land moves with you like memory. An urban Indian belongs to the city, and cities belong to the earth. Everything here is formed in relation to every other living and non-living thing from the earth. All our relations. The process that brings anything to its current form, chemical, synthetic, technological, or otherwise, doesn't make the product not a product of the living earth. Buildings, cars, freeways, are these not of the earth? Were they shipped in from Mars, the moon? Is it because they're processed, manufactured, or that we handle them? Are we so different? Were we at one time not something else entirely? Homo sapiens, single-celled organisms, space dust, unidentifiable pre-bang quantum theory? Cities form in the same way as galaxies. Urban Indians feel at home walking in the shadow of a downtown building. We came to know the downtown Oakland skyline better than we did any sacred mountain range. The redwoods in the Oakland Hills better than any other deep wild forest. We know the sound of the freeway better than we do rivers, the howl of distant trains better than wolf howls. We know the smell of gas and freshly wet concrete and burned rubber better than we do the smell of cedar or sage or even fry bread, which isn't traditional, like reservations aren't traditional. But nothing is original. Everything comes from something that came before, which was once nothing. Everything is new and doomed. We ride buses, trains, and cars across over and under concrete plains. Being Indian has never been about returning to the land. The land is everywhere or nowhere. This is from a chapter that appeared in the New Yorker as a story called The State. And in the novel, it's called Thomas Frank. My actual name is Thomas Frank Orange. I sort of like openly wrote this as like, this character isn't me. It wasn't like baldly autobiographical, but it's based on my life in many ways. And the New Yorker editor, Deborah Treisman, had me change the title of the story that they wanted to publish in the New Yorker, because Thomas Frank is some kind of respected journalist. I've never heard of him, but so The State is was, if you've read it or if you've heard of it, that was the name of it within that context. But it's called Thomas Frank in the novel, and I'm just going to read a little bit here. Thomas Frank. How many people here have read or heard this story? Okay, less people than that. Okay, good. Before you were born, you were a head and a tail in a milky pool, a swimmer. You were a race, a dying off, a breaking through, an arrival. Before you were born, you were an egg, and your mom, who was an egg, and her mom. Before you were born, you were the nested Russian grandmother doll of possibility in your mom's ovaries. You were two halves of 1,000 different kinds of possibilities, a million heads or tails, flip shine on a spun coin. Before you were born, you were the idea to make it to California for gold or bust. You were white, you were brown, you were red, you were dust. You were hiding, you were seeking. Before you were born, you were chased, beaten, broken, trapped on a reservation in Oklahoma. Before you were born, you were an idea your mom got into her head in the 70s to hitchhike across the country and become a dancer in New York. You were on your way when she did not make it across the country, but sputtered and spiraled and wound up in Taos, New Mexico, at a peyote commune named Morning Star. Before you were born, you were your dad's decision to move away from the reservation up to northern New Mexico to learn about a Pueblo guy's fireplace. You were the light in the wet of your parents' eyes as they met across that fireplace in ceremony. Before you were born, your halves inside them moved to Oakland. Before you were born, before your body was much more than heart, spine, bone, brain, skin, blood, and vein, when you just started to build muscle with movement. Before you showed, bulged in her belly, as her belly. Before your dad's pride could belly swell from the sight of you, your parents were in a room listening to the sound your heart made. You had an arrhythmic heartbeat. The doctor said it was normal. Your arrhythmic heart was not abnormal. Maybe he's a drummer, your dad said. He doesn't even know what a drum is, your mom said. Heart, your dad said. The man said arrhythmic. That means no rhythm. Maybe it just means he knows the rhythm so good he doesn't always hit it when you expect him to. Rhythm of what? She said. But once you got big enough to make your mom feel you, she couldn't deny it. You swam to the beat. When your dad brought out the kettle drum, you'd kick her in time with it, or to her heartbeat, or to one of the oldies mixtapes she'd made from records she loved and played to no end in your Aerostar minivan. Once you were out in the world running and jumping and climbing, you tapped your toes and fingers everywhere. All the time. On tabletops, desktops. You tapped every surface you found in front of you. Listened for the sound things made back at you when you hit them. The timbre of taps, the din of dings, silverware clings on kitchens, in kitchens, door knocks, knuckle cracks, head scratches. You are finding out that everything makes a sound. Everything can be drumming, whether rhythm is kept or strays. Even gunshots and backfire. the howl of trains at night, the wind against your windows. The world is made of sound. But inside every kind of sound lurked a sadness. In the quiet between your parents after a fight, they both managed to lose. You and your sisters listening through the walls for tones, listening for early signs of a fight, for late signs of a fight reignited. The sound of the worship service, that building drone and wail of evangelical Christian worship, your mom speaking in tongues on the crest of that weekly Sunday wave, sadness because you couldn't feel any of it in there and wanted to, felt you needed it, that it could protect you from the dreams you had almost every night about the end of the world and the possibility of hell forever, you living there still a boy, unable to die or leave or do anything but burn in a lake of fire. Sadness came when you had to wake up your snoring dad in church, even as members of the congregation, members of your own family, were being slain by the Holy Ghost in the aisles right next to him. Sadness came when the days got shorter at the end of summer, when the street got quiet without kids out anymore. In the color of that fleeting sky, sadness lurked, sadness pounced, slid in between everything, anything it could find its way into, through sound, through you. You didn't think of any of the tapping or knocking as drumming until you actually started drumming many years later. It would have been good to know that you'd always done something naturally. But there was too much going on with everyone else in your family for anyone to notice. You probably should have done something else with your fingers and toes than tap, with your mind and time than knock at all the surfaces in your life, like you were looking for a way in. Thank you.
That was really great. And of course, a lot of people have read They're There, but we do have a copy to share with you guys today. And want to thank Tommy Orange, who's one of our graduates, for sharing that with us. The next thing author that we want to share is actually someone else who has some national notoriety, which is Joy Harjo, who's actually the poet laureate of our country. And it's fantastic to have that type of representation. And she has just been asked to continue as poet laureate. So we will continue to hear from her. She will continue to bring representation to a national stage. It has some great books of poetry. We have one to give out today. One of the poems that she'll be sharing in American Sunrise is from that book. And she's also just edited a compendium of native poets that is available to purchase right now. So we'll share two of her poems, and then we'll move on to another author.
My name is Joy Harjo, and this poem is called Grace. I think of wind and her wild ways, the year we had nothing to lose, and lost it anyway. In the cursed country of the fox, we still talk about that winter, how the cold froze imaginary buffalo on the stuffed horizon of snowbanks. The haunting voices of the starved and mutilated broke fences, crashed our thermostat dreams, and we couldn't stand it one more time. So once again we lost a winter in stubborn memory, walked through cheap apartment walls, skated through fields of ghosts into a town that never wanted us in the epic search for grace. Like coyote, like rabbit, we could not contain our terror and clowned our way through a season of false midnights. We had to swallow that town with laughter so it would go down easy as honey. And one morning, as the sun struggled to break ice and our dreams had found us with coffee and pancakes in a truck stop along Highway 80, we found Grace. I could say Grace was a woman with time on her hands, or a white buffalo escaped from memory. But in that dingy light, it was a promise of balance. We once again understood the talk of animals, and spring was lean and hungry with the hope of children and corn. I would like to say with Grace we picked ourselves up and walked into the spring thaw. We didn't. The next season was worse. You went home to Leech Lake to work with the tribe, and I went south and wind. I am still crazy. I know there is something larger than the memory of a dispossessed people. We have seen it. An American sunrise. We were running out of breath as we ran to meet ourselves. We were surfacing the edge of our ancestors' fights and ready to strike. It was difficult to lose days in the Indian bar if you were straight, easy if you played pool and drank to remember, to forget. We made plans to be professional and did, and some of us could sing. When we drove to the edge of the mountains with a drum, we made sense of our beautiful crazed lives under the starry stars. Sin was invented by the Christians, as was the devil, we sang. We were the heathens, but needed to be saved from them. Thin chance. We knew we were all related in this story. A little gin will clarify the dark and make us all feel like dancing. We had something to do with the origins of blues and jazz. I argued with the music as I filled the jukebox with dimes in June. 40 years later, and we still want justice. We are still America. We. Thank you, Gwendolyn Brooks.
That was really great to hear Joy reading her own words. And like I said, we'll be sharing some of that with you, but please seek out, these authors, purchase their work, share them. And the best thing that I've ever done is whenever I finish reading a book, I pass it along to someone else. It's a great way to continue to share and connect people with wonderful stories and inspiration. So our next author is actually someone local here to Denver area, Tena Winder. She is the CEO of Dream Warriors Management, who represents many Native artists and performers, and also works at CU Boulder here in Colorado, helping Native students to connect with higher education. She's done quite a bit of poetry and has recorded, especially for us, several poems that we will share now.
Hi everyone, my name is Tena Winder. I'm Duckwater Shoshone, Pyramid Lake Paiute, Southern Ute, Dene, and Black, and I'll be sharing some poems with you. Learning to say I love you. My favorite conversations are with my grandmother while she teaches me words in Indian as she says, I ask, how do you say, where did you go? And where are you going? Questions that layer my tongue in ash, reminding me of fire, the taste. Each time I speak, the slow burn of every loss I have witnessed cracks my lips. Go and going axe singed into my bones, so I ask, teach me, I'm coming with you. So it sits rock heavy in my mouth, because my tongue is at war with history. Boarding school, kill the Indian, save the man, acts of colonization, strained pronunciation. When I want to say, take me with you, it dissolves. Before I can stomach the sweetness of language, hours, I'm losing. I am lost, lodged somewhere in my throat between decades of broken syllables. Teach me how to reach the ones who are born already running. Teach me how to talk to the ones who need it most. Dear universe, gift me words that linger softly like dust. There must be a phrase to contain wherever you go, whether or not you know where you've been or where you are going. This next poem I'm going to read is called The Milky Way Escapes My Mouth. Whenever two lips begin to form your name, I cough stars lodged deep within my lungs. They rush from tongue weighted in dust, words I didn't ask, where are you going? Or notice the blank spaces in your breathing as you slept. They say the more massive the star, the shorter the lifespan. They have greater pressure on their cores. Yours burns so brightly, I should have known you'd collapse, disappear into image, a black hole dissolving trace amounts. I am left stargazing. I am left stargazing 5 times a day for years, catalog phrases, chart each word, label every facial expression. Telescope until my eyes bleed, constellations, even then I can't navigate my way into understanding light years, how we let darkness slip in. Is it madness to wonder if it ever really happened? You, a shadow never leaving until I inserted continents between us. I lost you in the crevice between night and day. You died while I was sleeping, dreaming of a galaxy far, far away, where love eclipses. A rising tide of longing fills my body, bones, the ribs, sheltering the cave within me, echoing. Each night, I open mouth sky wide to swallow stars and sing to the moon a story about the light of two people who continue to cross and uncross in their falling, no matter how unstable in orbit. This last poem I'll share is called When the Stars Fall from the Sky. Say we begin in surrender, spiraling through loss, still sleeping in our bones. I once heard a creation story about coyote falling from the blanket of the sky, unable to keep pace, keep time. Why did we grow up learning to wish on anything that falls? Say it is possible to invite our demons to dinner, ask if they prefer to pray before or after. We eat, we feast, pull up a seat next to our wounds, listen to them fight over who came first. As if a rupture chooses how it wants to break, as if a scar decides how it wants to come undone. At the dinner table, your belly swells with rage as if to say healing is pain demanding a seat at the table, as if to remind you you cannot forgive your ghosts until you stop grieving them. Tell me it's possible to drink in constellations, savoring each star east to west. Tell me when the stars fall from the sky, we'll still be able to find our way back home.
That was really beautiful. And like I said, you can find some more of Tenea's readings and some of her works online. And always check out, Dream Warriors, where they're performing, what they're doing. You may know Tall Paul or Frank Wallen, some of the performers that she manages. They're always looking to perform and connect. They've actually been a part of some of our events that we had earlier this semester, which was great. Also a part of these social breaks that we can just listen to performances, just connect and kind of get away from, all of our responsibilities and things that we're working on. So thank you so much, Tenea. So now I want to introduce our live guest, Dr. Lee Francis. There he is. I was very glad to get to know Lee and work with him a little bit since I've been here at the American Indian College Fund. He is a comic book writer and the CEO of Red Planet Books and Comics, the only Indigenous comic book shop in the world, in the entire world. And had there not been this pandemic, he would have been in, I think you weren't sure going to be heading to Australia for an Indigenous Comic Con, I think?
We just we just made it in last year. So that was like right in the wire, like right before the fires started happening. I guess that was sort of like our foretelling our doom, apparently. So, you know, in general. So yeah, we just made it like in and out in December. So it's been a wonderfully quiet year and really beautiful, and, you know, struggles, everybody, you know, but hopefully everybody's staying safe, and we've been staying safe here as well. So
That's great.
Yep.
Well, I will say that almost all the books and comics that we're giving away today came from his shop. You can order online. It's a great place. Go to Red Planet Books and Comics online. Order some stuff for the holidays. You need to order it quick, though. If you actually want it to arrive, the mail has been, unfortunately, very slow.
Been very slow, and we're getting it because when we order books in, so if you want them, get them now, because it's going to take us a little bit. It takes us about, at this point, 6 days. It used to take like 2 to 3. It's like 6 days now to get books in, and then we try and ship them out as quick as possible. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah, order from us. So.
Well, Lee is going to share actually an animated story with us.
Actually, I'm going to shift up on you if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because listening to all the poets, I feel I'm going to be a poet today. I'm very excited to be a poet and writer today for all of you amazing students that are out there. So if you're comfortable with that, I think that's what I'd like to do live poetry. It's
let the spirit move you. So
wonderful. Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you, and
Great.
then after Lee is done, we'll finish up with some looking at comics. And also some native stories from Rebecca Roan Horace.
Fantastic. So Goatsi Halpa, the Wacha Washrap, Wahindo Me Lee Francis, Washesh Gaweka Me, Yves Medical Me. I'm so glad to be able to be here. I love, excuse me, live TV. I love seeing everybody's, like where everybody's from. It's amazing. So I hope y'all are staying well and wonderful. You know, we heard the pitch from Red Planet, but it doesn't matter since everybody's spread over. There's 4 native bookstores here in the United States. There's about 8 of them up in First Nations, so-called Canada. You know, but us 4, we run this gamut. So anytime you get the chance, you know, to support the, you know, our businesses, everything we do goes back to our comic book artists, and it goes back to being local. That's what we try to do. You know, my family from the Pueblo of Laguna, you know, I started out as a writer. I was, you know, when we were talking about the invitation, it was, you know, I was like, well, I guess I could do story time when I read a comic, but it's a little weird. So we'll let you just read the comics. Y'all can check them out. There's voice work that goes with comics, but today I'm really excited that we can, that I'm gonna do a little bit of poetry for you as well. Tenaya is one of my favorite peoples in the world, so that just totally got me all inspired. I was like, I'll pull out some of my poetry, because that's actually really where I started writing. And so I hope some of these poems, I got 3 poems to give you a little bit of inspiration, and to send you out with good spirit. So the first one's called Indian Moon. Grandma never called it a harvest moon, always said it was an Indian moon, because it reminded her of her first love. Tall and handsome Choctaw boy from on past Anadarko. Said he was going to be a pilot, and someday he was going to fly to the moon in a big old rocket ship. Leave the dust of this old dragon rodeo, this old stone-fisted tin town hard beneath his feet, kick off and just fly, fly, fly. See, Grandma knew of the moon. Had been there in the dreams of her people, hitched a ride on the back of old Coyote one night when he was out dancing and making trouble. She said there wasn't much there, except a lot of cold gray rocks and a pretty nice view of the stars, but there weren't no one there to talk to. Didn't matter, because that Choctaw boy had big plans, knew where he was headed, the first Indian in space, 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 space. Something his people could be proud of. Something more than an old ranch hand hauling hay in a rusted wagon. He was going to be a hero, a space hero, and he would take her with him. Wouldn't be no empty moon if they were there together. Said they'd build a little house from space rock and star mortar, and each morning they'd drink space coffee, waving to the people far, far below. And Grandma loved him for that. Loved him for all his moonshines, his rocket ship dreams, his broken promises, his wilted bouquets, his mean drinking, his tender apologies, his tired old smile. Grandma called him her moon boy. Always said they would go together. Watched him take his rocket fuel to that old rusted wagon and take off into the night, a trail of fire against the dark blue. And he never came back. So for Grandma, it's an Indian moon, red and beautiful, lost in the night sky. So my next poem is about my kiddo. I read a lot of poems about my son and my family, as a lot of us do. So this is a poem for him. It's called "I Will Teach My Son a Story of Growing." I will teach my son a story of growing. Place his hands in the dirt while I speak slowly of his ancestors and their ancient tellings of all things green and golden. His fingers will stretch in the rich soil, and his story will grow deep, intertwined with his great-grandmother who spent her days giving willing words to each seed and fold, each leaf and bend. Her heartbeat of lessons and laughter, the bloodline of her ancient family, 3 mothers, 3 sisters, 3 daughters, unfolding themselves year after year, a tangle of syllables reaching to the sky. I will teach my son a story of singing, to lift his voice to the horizon, paint his song on canyon walls in brilliant episodes of birth and rebirth. His notes echo in patterns of 3s, tetrads of harmony, cycling back on themselves, an infinite invention of thought and thoughtfulness, body and embodiment, spirit and the melody of the first green stalk rising above the still cold earth, a joyous symphony of voice and voice and voice, 3 songs woven in the early morning mist. I will teach my son a story of praying, to offer his arms and legs, head, neck, and ribs as a remembrance of all the songs and stories, vows and blessings buried in the earth for him. His prayers like the slow river from his lips, always mindful that to live in the desert means to always be thinking of water, to remember that we are of the sea and our sisters are a gift of the rain. I will teach my son a story of dreaming, to plant his night fields in moonrise furrows, digging his fingers and toes into a time when time washes away in streaks of sunset slumber, a time when time uncurls broad leaves to catch the first sun in its green arms, simple and warm, like the first fire brought to us in the time before time, when we learned our stories on the backs of our tongues, and we dreamed together in 3s, 3 stars, 3 hearts, 3 hands, forever connected. I will teach my son a story of growing as they taught us in the long ago time, 3 sisters, generous and divine. We will invite them to our graceful harvest, share our stories of time and toil and hands pressed to the earth, our spring intentions, our whispers of rain, our indelible sacrifice of minutes motionless in the starry fields, waiting hushed and hesitant for the nascent story to begin again. A story of the body, unbroken, unending, cord wrapped around spine, veins and organs, breath and heartbeat. A story of remembrance, of resistance, of resilience, survival on sunburned rock, bent back and finger cracked, parched and precarious, balanced on the edge of here and the beyond place where existence and story are one and the same. That place where 3 sisters sit easy beside a small river, their faces angled to the sun, fingers intertwined, waiting for us to teach our children a story of dreaming, a story of singing, a story of praying, a story of growing. Thank you, everybody. I don't get to be a poet very often, but I figured I'd take my shot today. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Again, if you get the chance, as we say, hashtag buy something else, buy native. That's our mantra right now. But even more so, support your own home communities, support your own people wherever you can. Remember to bring all these stories with you, because we carry them on our backs and we take them with us wherever we go. So thank you so much, Tawae, for allowing me to be here today with all of you. Be amazing students. This too shall pass, and you got a bright and brilliant future ahead. And I look forward to meeting you all in person someday. Peace.
Thank you so much, Lee. That was great. And like Lee said, skip Amazon. go to your local booksellers, especially those that are in your communities. And if you know artists in your communities, whether they're textile artists, whether they're poets, whether they're a graphic artist, support them. Find great gifts for your family and friends and the ones that you cherish from them. Find something that means a lot. So from here, because we're in the comics mode, we're gonna talk a little bit about something that Marvel did during Native American Heritage Month, and I want to share this little compendium that they put together that highlights a lot of Native artists. So I'm going to kind of let it speak for itself here. So this is this great comic that came out that has a lot of Native stories in it. You see, there's amazing contributors to it. We got a lot of copies, which of course we're going to be giving out a lot of those today. Uh, but we couldn't get any interviews with any of the other creators in it. But I wanted to share an interview that we have with Jeffrey Vareggi, who's the one who's done some of these amazing pieces here like this, taking basically Marvel heroes and interpreting them. He actually had a exhibit at the Smithsonian the year before, basically showing his interpretations, his Native interpretations of these heroes. Now, I can give you a little sneak peek. So when you open up the cover of the comic, you've got the Watcher. And if, for those of you who don't know, the Watcher is one of these intergalactic beings that watches everything in the universe, and he is telling the story of Native heroes. So all the stories in here, and then when you go to the next page, you have this huge layout. And as you see here on the edges, you have all these different Native inspired heroes. He talks about them. He talks about their great works. And that's just a little sneak peek I'm going to give you. I hope that you guys will all pick that up and that some of you will win that. But I want to play an interview with Jeffrey because he has a very personal story about how his art kind of helped him in his life. And it really means a lot to me and to a lot of other people that have seen this. So let me share that with you right now.
I've been into comics. I can't remember when I wasn't into comics. When I was a child, it just enhanced my imagination. It just kept the worlds alive that I loved. X-Men in particular, they were constantly doing good and trying to make the world a better place, but they were hated because of who they were. They were hated because nobody understood them. So it provided me a sense of comfort and a place to get away from everything, you know. At least I could go there. And then when I wasn't reading them, I was drawing them, trying to just prolong that feeling. I'd battled depression my whole life. My whole life, I've been in fear of everything. It's anxiety, just accepting who I was and having to love that I'm a nerd. I mean, even today, in this era, you still don't, it's hard because I was picked on for this. It wasn't until I went to counseling, started getting medication, that I learned to love and accept myself. And at that point I said, you know what, I need to start making art for me. I don't care if it sells, I don't care if it does great. I just know that I want to make it, because I decided at that point that if I'm going to tell a story, I need to tell my story. The only story I know is being native and on the reservation. But these are 2012. These were my first pieces. The bat is actually what put me on the map. I just knew that I was having fun and did Batman in a way that I thought would still feel native. Same thing with Spider-Man. Red Wolf was Marvel's first Native American character. He came out in the 60s. Later on, he had his own series. When they decided to bring him back, however, they wanted to get rid of a lot of stereotypical things that you'd find in that book. Marvel brought me on for Red Wolf for that specific purpose. When they were telling a Native story, they wanted to make sure that it was honoring and letting go of the old stereotypes that may occur. And they also wanted to get in some of those little things that only Native people would understand, but definitely is part of the fabric of who we are. I'm doing the same thing that my ancestors did. I'm just telling the stories that I care about and that I love, that are relevant to me. And now I get to do it in a way with an audience that's much larger. And they're seeing that, that as that Native culture we're much more than just what you see on TV or what you've seen on screen in the past, that we're alive and we're thriving and that we're able to be contemporary.
That was a really great story that Jeffrey shared. And he's been one of those who stepped out into some of those big platforms. But just like Lee talked about before, there's a lot of independent artists and comic book creators and storytellers out there. So, in addition to these things that may be more familiar, seek out some of those news stories, some of the things that will kind of inspire you and take you into new places. One of the ones with our last artist is something that I really have enjoyed and getting to know is Rebecca Roan Horace and some of her works. She's had several large books that have come out and been bestsellers. The very first one that I read of hers is one that we'll be giving away today, Trail of Lightning. This is actually, there's 2 books in this series so far. This is set on Earth. Basically, Maggie right here is a fierce Dene monster hunter. Very much kind of apocalyptic. She's in an area where much of the world has been flooded, and there was a wall that was set up around the Navajo Nation, and so there are survivors there. But she's battling monsters, and both books in the series so far have been great. But she's just had one new novel that's come out just in October, Black Sun. And you may have heard some interviews or things with her. And it's not set on Earth. It's set in an alien land, but has a lot of native themes. It talks about kind of a almost kind of South American type culture and the vengeful god that is coming back to Earth in this time when there's a solar eclipse. So I've only just started reading it. It's really fantastic. She's had some other things too. She's done a children's book as well, where she's taken different native stories and themes and woven those into children's stories. You can find that very easily too. Unfortunately, yes, Race to the Sun. Someone put that in there. Unfortunately, Rebecca could not make it today. I'm very sorry for that. She has been super, super busy, as you can imagine. In fact, last time I talked with her, she was actually working on a writing room for a television show. So she's getting many, many, many more opportunities with the success that she's had to bring Native representation into the media, which is a great thing. But she's very busy right now. I think her agent had told me she had done something like 78 media appearances just for her new novel, Black Sun. So you think about that, along with the time for her to write and do things. She's actually trained as a lawyer and originally was doing art on the side and has kind of come into that. So one of the things I want to play for you real quick is a short interview that we did with her where she talks about how she got into writing. And then I'm going to read a short passage from this new novel for you guys to hear kind of a preview of it. So let me share that short interview with you now.
When I went to school, I didn't know that I could study writing. It wasn't something that had occurred to me. I just thought reading science fiction and fantasy and writing these stories, it was just for me. So I actually studied religious studies in undergrad, went on and got a graduate degree, and then later on went to law school. I realized that most of the stories I was reading in science fiction and fantasy, as much as I love them, they were mostly about white guys. So I fell in love with those kind of stories, but they still didn't have the sort of representation that I wanted. I wanted to see native characters living in like a native world, surrounded by, the people and the stories and the places that I knew. So when I wrote Trail of Lightning, I imagined a world that had very little to do with the white world. I set the book in the future for a reason. It was also important to me to have native people living and thriving and existing in a future world. Because so much of what we see on TV and in film and popular culture is native people in the 1800s. They don't get to be the heroes, they don't get to be, the badass killing the monster. And I really tried to do that on purpose in the book. I wanted to show that, that you didn't have to work in stereotypes. We could be whatever we wanted to be. So here's the thing about being creative or being a writer or an artist. It doesn't always pay the bills. It can be a passion, and that's okay. It can be a hobby, and that's okay. One of the biggest challenges, at least, in being a writer is just believing in yourself. Writers have to have this weird sort of confidence that what you're writing is something that people want to read. And so you sort of have to just take that chance. And there's a lot of rejection in the field because like any creative field, anytime you want to create art or you're going to be an actor or you're going to write, your work gets judged. The exciting thing is when your book or your work finds the right person or the right audience, you can change lives.
That was a great insight that she gave, and hopefully some encouragement to those of you who think about creating your own art, in doing so, to continue to work in that and look for areas to be involved. We have some great support from Walt Disney Corporation through scholarships and additional opportunities that we offer. So feel free to follow the College Fund and learn about those opportunities and continue to work towards that. I know that Disney is one of, even though they're a huge company, they are one of those that really works to find representation and to find people that are responsible for, the voices that may not be heard. So when you look at things like, big projects that they did like Moana or Black Panther, they really invested in kind of being representative in those spaces and really continued to do so. So all right, now we have Black Sun. I'm going to read a small portion of this. As I mentioned, this is kind of not a world that we're used to. The city that they talk about is the city of Tova, where this what they're calling the convergence, where this solstice is happening. There is a eclipse, and it's also happening at a very important time in the season for the people of this town. It deals with gods, spirits, which is those who do not have form but are looking to move people and move objects in the ways that they want. So I'm going to read you a short part from chapter 3. Narampa was not dead, even though the witch Zatiah thought her so. She could not move her limbs or open her eyes, and her breath came out in almost an imperceptible wheeze. But she could hear, and more so feeling everything was happening to her. She felt the apprentice's hands, two girls who strained and heaved as they dragged her from the river. She heard Zatiah order them to build up the fire, and then she breathed in the smoke the witch fanned from the flames. She screamed without sound at the hot, thick drip of blood against her naked chest. And then, at Zatiah's command to her apprentices to spread the blood evenly over Narampa's supine form. And as the witch covered her with a blanket, pausing only to pry her mouth open and place a salt rock under her tongue, Narampa wept unnoticed tears. Narampa had been a child once, long before she joined the priesthood, before she learned to read the course of the sun and command sky madre queens. She had been a beggar in the poor district of Tova called Coyote's Maw. Often, when the streets were quiet, before the evening crowd of gamblers, tourists, and pleasure seekers arrived in the Maw, Narampa had sat on the westernmost ledge at the top level of the district and peered out over the dizzying distance that separated her home from the wealthier neighborhoods. Looking out over the city, she had dreamed, of crossing the woven suspension bridges that swayed like spider silk in the gentle canyon breezes and allowed free travel among all the districts but hers. Of exploring the wide roads and stately adobe brick homes, some 4 and 5 stories high, not as servants like her mother, but as someone who belonged there, and brashest of all, of being a scholar in the celestial tower in the district of Atsa. She was only 10 then, and her destiny far from decided. She had not yet learned she was poor, and people like her only went to the celestial tower as servants. Or that once you were poor, people hated you for it, even when you weren't poor anymore. She remembered a summer night she sat with her family around the cooking coals, and they shared with their neighbors, talking about how she wished to study the stars. In the sky-made districts, the scions ate on great communal terraces where kitchens produced food for hundreds, but in the Maw, people kindled small dugout fires in the streets, where they roasted ground cornmeal or buried whole ears of corn in hot ash to bake overnight. At her words, her mother had exchanged a mysterious glance with her father, and he had nodded. "It is good fortune that you would talk of studying the stars tonight, Nara," her mother said with her voice high with excitement. "I spoke to the matron I serve, and she remembered you, and how smart you are, and how well you learn, and she has agreed to sponsor you at the Celestial Tower." Narampa felt dizzy. "I am going to be a scholar priest?" She knew there were other disciplines one can learn at the tower: healing, writing, and history, even at the art of death. But all she ever wanted was to study the sun and moon and movement of the stars. Her father laughed. "Oh no, little one. They would never let you study there. You are to work. You will serve the priests, help cook their meals, wash their vestments, and clean their floors." Her stomach dropped in disappointment. But her mother gave her father a long look. "Perhaps you will learn something if you listen closely. A servant can learn a lot through observation if she is quiet." "Then I will be quiet," she vowed solemnly, "and I will learn everything." "That's not fair," her younger brother, Donachi, protested. "Why does she get to go and not me?" "Who wants to be a priest when you could be one of the sky-made scions?" her brother Alec asked. Narampa bit her lip. Being sky-made was exciting. Water Strider was her favorite clan, and its matron was one her mother served. It ruled the district of Tididai, which was closest to the Maw. She could see the curving edges of its cliffs when she gazed across the narrow canyon that divided them. Its great sky blue banners cascading down the sides of the adobe buildings between dripping green vines and colorful tendrils of starburst flowers. She could even see the trees there. Trees! The Maw had no trees. Tididi was a garden of impossible green and growth, with a waterfall that ran right through it like a living street before tumbling to the river that bisected Tova below. When her mother talked of it, she imagined Tididi was something out of history, a place she could only hear about but never touch. That's so beautiful. I got caught up just reading it. So I hope that gives you a nice taste of what's in that novel. We'll also have a copy of this that we'll be sending out to one of you that's listening today. So I want to thank you guys for taking a break and for joining us and getting away and connecting, for being a part of this communal activity of reading the words of some of our artists and authors, and hope that you will join us again sometime. I would really encourage you. This is actually the last event of our semester, but go to collegefund.org/native pathways. I will type it into the chat. And we'll have a whole semester of additional events, some just like this and some that are more educational, that are available to you free of charge to join. We have lots of great giveaways and things. So just go to collegefund.org, native pathways. And a lot of those events will not be posted until the end of the year for the next semester, but be sure to visit back and take a look at that. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks for being a part of this. And we will have a recording of this later on that'll be on that same Native Pathways page if you want to share it with anyone else, or you want to go back and listen to any of the readings. So thank you so much. You guys take care. Have a great end of the semester, and we will see you again in 2021, a much better year for all of us. So take care.